The starship Horizon's Edge floated in the empty space between two galaxies. It was a proud ship, built by human hands, and today, it would make history. For the first time ever, humans would meet aliens face to face. Commander Jake Morrison stood near the airlock and tried to keep his breathing steady. He had spent 20 years in space. He had survived asteroid storms and engine failures, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. In just a few minutes, he would shake hands with a being from another world. "They're docking now," said Lily Patterson, his communications officer. She was a calm woman with short brown hair and kind eyes. A large German shepherd named Duke sat beside her, his tongue hanging out in a happy pant. Jake nodded. "Everyone remember their training. These are the Kethrani. They're peaceful. They've been watching us for decades. They think we're ready to join the Galactic Council." The airlock hissed open, and Jake got his first look at Ambassador Veltris. The alien was tall and thin, with 4 arms and a body covered in shiny blue plates. His head was shaped like a triangle, and his eyes were large and black like pools of ink. Behind him stood 6 more Kethrani, all of them wearing silver robes that marked them as diplomats. Jake stepped forward and smiled. "Welcome aboard the Horizon's Edge, Ambassador. Humanity is honored to meet you." Veltris made a sound like clicking stones. A small device on his chest glowed, and a moment later, a translated voice came out. "The honor belongs to us. Commander, we have watched your species grow for many cycles. Your progress has been impressive." The word impressive came out strange, like Veltris wasn't sure if it was the right word. Jake led the delegation down the main corridor. He pointed out the different sections of the ship: the medical bay, the recreation room, the hydroponic garden, where they grew fresh vegetables. The Kethrani seemed interested in everything. They asked questions about human food, human sleep cycles, and human entertainment. Everything was going perfectly. Then Duke barked. It was a friendly bark, the kind of sound he made when he wanted attention. Lily had fallen a few steps behind the group, and Duke was trotting beside her, his tail wagging back and forth. Ambassador Veltris turned around. His large black eyes locked onto the dog. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Veltris screamed. It was not a human scream. It was a high-pitched whistle that hurt Jake's ears and made his teeth ache. The other Kethrani joined in, their bodies shaking with terror. A strange smell filled the air, something sharp and chemical, like burning plastic. "What's happening?" Jake shouted. Veltris pointed one trembling arm at Duke. "Predator. You have brought a predator onto this vessel." Lily grabbed Duke's collar and held him back. The dog whined in confusion, not understanding why everyone was upset. "He's not a predator. He's my dog." But the Kethrani weren't listening. They ran down the corridor, their thin legs moving faster than Jake thought possible. They found an empty storage room and locked themselves inside. No matter how much Jake knocked on the door, they refused to come out. Jake turned to Lily with wide eyes. "What just happened?" Lily looked down at Duke, who was now sitting quietly at her feet. "I have no idea. He didn't do anything wrong." It took 3 hours for the Kethrani to calm down enough to communicate through the door. Jake spoke to them through a small speaker, his voice gentle and patient. "Ambassador, please. Duke is harmless. He's been living on this ship for 2 years. He's never hurt anyone." Veltris's voice came through the speaker, still shaking. "You do not understand, Commander. We have studied your planet. We know what that creature is. It is a descendant of the wolf, one of the most efficient pack hunters in your world's history. Its ancestors killed prey 3 times their size. They hunted in groups. They never stopped. They never showed mercy." Jake rubbed his forehead. "That was thousands of years ago. Dogs aren't like that anymore. They're companions. They're friends." "Friends?" The word came out like Veltris couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You have made friends with an apex predator?" "Yes," Jake said simply. "Lots of humans have dogs. It's completely normal." There was a long silence on the other side of the door. "This changes everything," Veltris finally said. "The Council must be informed. Your species is more dangerous than we ever imagined." Jake felt his heart sink. This was supposed to be humanity's great moment, their entrance onto the galactic stage. Now it was falling apart because of a friendly dog who just wanted belly rubs. "Ambassador, please. Let me explain. Dogs aren't weapons. They're family." But Veltris had stopped responding. Later that night, Jake sat alone in his quarters, staring out the window at the distant stars. Lily knocked on his door and came in with 2 cups of coffee. Duke followed behind her, his nails clicking softly on the metal floor. "It's not your fault," Lily said, handing him a cup. "I should have thought about this," Jake replied. "We spent months preparing for this meeting. We learned their language, their customs, their history. But we never considered that they might be scared of our pets." Duke walked over and rested his head on Jake's knee. His brown eyes looked up with pure love and trust. Jake couldn't help but smile and scratch behind the dog's ears. "Look at him," Jake said quietly. "He doesn't understand why they're so afraid. To him, everyone is just a potential friend." Lily sat down across from him. "What do we do now?" Jake took a deep breath. "We fix this. We show them that humans and dogs aren't a threat. We show them what it really means to have a bond with another species. And if they don't believe us," Jake looked back out at the stars. Somewhere out there, thousands of alien civilizations were about to learn about humanity and about the animals they had chosen to love. "Then we'll have to be very convincing," he said. Duke's tail thumped against the floor, as if he understood and approved of the plan. In his simple dog mind, there was no problem that couldn't be solved with enough patience, enough kindness, and enough love. Jake hoped that the galaxy would come to understand that too. But deep down, he knew that the hard part was just beginning. The message spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. On the Kethrani homeworld, Ambassador Veltris stood before a massive screen and told his people what he had seen. His voice still shook when he described the creature, the dog, and how the humans had shown no fear at all. They had walked beside it. They had touched it. They had called it family. Within hours, every species in the Galactic Council had accessed Earth's planetary survey data. What they found made them question everything they thought they knew about humans. Earth was listed as a Category 7 death world. Only 12 planets in the entire galaxy had ever received such a dangerous rating. The file described a planet where the ground shook and split open without warning, where water fell from the sky in deadly amounts, where the temperature could change so fast that unprepared creatures would freeze or burn within minutes. But the fauna section was what truly horrified them. The Velian Imperium was the first to share their findings with the Council. Counselor Zethra, a tall being with silver skin and 3 eyes, stood before the assembly and read from the database. "Humans regularly share their homes with descendants of wolves," he said, his voice heavy with disbelief. "These creatures, known as dogs, were once pack hunters capable of taking down prey many times larger than themselves. They have teeth designed for tearing flesh and jaws that can crush bone." The assembly hall went silent. "But that is not all," Zethra continued. "Humans also keep small predators, called cats. These animals kill billions of other Earth creatures every year, not for food, but for entertainment. They hunt for sport, and humans allow them to sleep in their beds." A wave of gasps and clicking sounds filled the room. "Some humans ride on the backs of massive animals called horses. These creatures weigh over 1,000 pounds and can kill with a single kick. Others keep snakes, legless predators that squeeze their prey to death or inject deadly poison. There are even humans who keep crocodilians as pets. These are ancient reptiles with the strongest bite force on their planet." Zethra set down his notes and looked at the assembly with all 3 of his eyes. "The question we must ask ourselves is simple. What kind of species forms bonds with creatures that could kill them? What does this tell us about humanity?" The debate lasted for days. Some species argued that humans must be extremely dangerous, natural predators themselves who had simply recognized other predators as equals. Others believed that humans had somehow dominated these animals, breaking their spirits and turning them into slaves. But a few species saw something different. They saw a form of courage that they could barely understand. Humans had looked at the most dangerous creatures on their world and decided to love them anyway. On Earth, the response to the growing galactic panic was confusion and frustration. Dr. Ben Hartwell was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life. He had spent his entire career dreaming of the day when humanity would meet other intelligent species. Now that dream was turning into a nightmare. "They think we're monsters," he said, pacing back and forth in his office. "They think our pets are weapons." His assistant, Emma Castillo, sat at her desk surrounded by piles of research papers. She was young and brilliant, with dark, curly hair and eyes that always seemed to be thinking about 10 things at once. "Can you blame them?" she asked. "Look at this from their perspective. Most intelligent species in the galaxy evolved on peaceful worlds. They never had to deal with predators. They never had to fight for survival the way we did." Ben stopped pacing and looked at her. "So what do we do?" Emma pulled up an image on her computer. It showed a golden retriever playing fetch with a little girl in a sunny backyard. The dog's tail was wagging. The girl was laughing. "We show them the truth," Emma said. "We show them that our relationships with animals aren't about fear or control. They're about love." Ben stared at the image for a long moment. "Do you think they'll understand?" "I don't know," Emma admitted. "But we have to try. If we can't convince them that dogs and cats are friends, not threats, then humanity will be alone in the galaxy forever." They worked for weeks, putting together a presentation that explained the history of domestication. They gathered videos of dogs greeting their owners after long trips. They collected stories of cats comforting sick children. They documented the 1,000 small ways that animals and humans had learned to care for each other over thousands of years. But Emma knew that words and videos might not be enough. The Galactic Council needed to see for themselves. Meanwhile, fear continued to spread among the stars. The Vorthak were a warrior species, known for conquering 12 star systems. They had never retreated from any enemy, but when they saw footage of a human child riding on the back of a horse, their military commanders gathered for an emergency meeting. "The small human is controlling a creature that weighs 10 times its mass," one general observed. "This is not natural. This is not possible. And yet it is happening," another replied. "The humans have somehow convinced these animals to serve them willingly. Imagine what they could do with proper war beasts." The Vorthok decided to increase their military spending by 40%, just in case. The Kethrani took a different approach. They began studying every piece of information they could find about human-animal relationships. They learned about service dogs that helped blind humans navigate the world. They discovered therapy cats that visited hospitals to comfort the dying. They read about horses that could sense human emotions and respond with gentle comfort. Slowly, some Kethrani began to wonder if they had judged humanity too quickly. One young researcher named Silith became obsessed with understanding dogs. She watched hundreds of hours of footage, studying the way dogs wagged their tails and tilted their heads. She learned that dogs could read human facial expressions better than any other animal on Earth. They could smell human emotions. They knew when their humans were sad, or scared, or happy. "This is not domination," Silith wrote in her research notes. "This is partnership. This is something the galaxy has never seen before." But her voice was small, and the galaxy was very large. The Galactic Council called for a formal investigation. They wanted humans to send a delegation to explain themselves. They wanted proof that humanity was not a threat. And most importantly, they wanted to see these animals for themselves. Ben and Emma received the invitation with mixed feelings. This was their chance to change everything, to show the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their ability to love. The space station called Convergence Prime floated at the center of the galaxy, a massive wheel of metal and light where 1,000 different species came together to trade and talk and make peace. Today, it would witness something that had never happened before. The human shuttle docked quietly at Bay 17. Inside, Commander Jake Morrison took a deep breath and looked at his small team. Lily stood with Duke at her side, the German shepherd calm and patient as always. Dr. Ben Hartwell held a pet carrier containing a gray tabby cat named Whiskers, who belonged to the shuttle's pilot, Chris Donovan. And Emma Castillo wore a thick leather glove on her left arm, where a beautiful red-tailed hawk named Apollo perched with sharp eyes watching everything. "Remember," Jake said, "we're here to show them who we really are. No fear, no aggression, just the truth." The airlock opened, and they walked into the station. The hallway was lined with soldiers from 12 different species. Some of them pointed weapons at the group. Others pressed themselves against the walls, trying to stay as far from the animals as possible. Jake heard strange sounds, clicking, whistling, and low growls that he couldn't understand. An escort of Kethrani guards led them toward the council chamber. None of them would look directly at Duke. The chamber itself was enormous. It was shaped like a bowl, with hundreds of seats rising up in circles around a central platform. Representatives from across the galaxy filled those seats, creatures of every shape and size that Jake could imagine. Some had tentacles, some had wings, some had so many eyes that Jake couldn't count them all, and every single one of them was staring at the animals. Jake stepped up to the central platform and cleared his throat. "Thank you for allowing us to speak today. I know that our arrival has caused concern throughout the galaxy. I know that many of you are afraid of what we have brought, but I promise you, there is nothing to fear." A voice boomed from somewhere in the upper seats. It belonged to Counselor Zethra of the Velian Imperium. "You say there is nothing to fear. Yet you bring apex predators into our most sacred hall. Explain yourself." "Human," Jake nodded. "That's exactly why we're here. To explain." He stepped aside, and Ben Hartwell walked forward with his presentation ready. 10,000 years ago, Ben began. Humans lived in caves and hunted with stone tools. We were not the strongest animals on our planet. We were not the fastest. We had no claws, no fangs, no venom. By every measure, we should have gone extinct. The chamber was completely silent, but we survived because we learned to make friends, not just with each other, with other species. Wolves were our first partners. They helped us hunt. We shared our food with them. Over thousands of years, those wolves became dogs. They chose to stay with us, and we chose to protect them. Ben gestured toward Lily and Duke. "This is Duke. He is a German shepherd. His ancestors were indeed wolves. But Duke has never hunted for food in his life. He eats from a bowl, he sleeps on a soft bed, and he would give his life to protect any member of his family." To demonstrate, Lily began putting Duke through simple commands. She raised her hand, and Duke sat. She pointed at the ground, and Duke lay down. She held up a treat, and Duke waited patiently until she gave permission to take it gently, carefully, without even a hint of aggression. Then Lily knelt down and wrapped her arms around Duke's neck. The dog's tail wagged, and he licked her face with pure joy. "This is what we mean by partnership," Ben said. "Duke isn't a slave. He isn't a weapon. He's a friend." A murmur spread through the chamber. Some delegates seemed confused, others seemed horrified, but a few, just a few, seemed curious. Chris Donovan stepped forward with Whiskers in his arms. The cat was a fluffy gray thing with bright green eyes and a pink nose. He looked completely unimpressed by the thousands of aliens staring at him. "This is Whiskers," Chris said. "He's a cat. And I want to address something that's been said about his species. Yes, cats hunt. It's in their nature. But they don't hunt humans. They've lived alongside us for thousands of years, keeping our homes free of pests and providing us with companionship." Chris set Whiskers down on the platform. The cat stretched, yawned, and began walking in a slow circle, examining his surroundings with typical feline curiosity. That's when something unexpected happened. Counselor Morinth, a massive reptilian creature with 6 limbs and scales the color of deep emerald, had been sitting in the front row. Whiskers walked straight toward him, jumped up onto the empty seat beside him, and then, before anyone could stop him, climbed right into Morinth's lap. The chamber erupted in chaos. Guards rushed forward. Delegates screamed in 36 languages. Someone activated an emergency alarm, but Morinth didn't move. The great reptilian counselor sat perfectly still, his 4 eyes focused on the small predator that had settled onto his legs. Whiskers turned in a circle twice, then curled up and began to purr. The sound filled the suddenly quiet chamber, a low, rumbling vibration that seemed to reach into every corner of the room. "What is it doing?" Morinth whispered, his voice trembling. "He's purring," Chris explained. "It means he feels safe. It means he likes you." Morinth looked down at the cat with an expression that Jake had never seen on an alien face before. It was wonder. It was confusion. And somewhere beneath all of that, it was the beginning of understanding. "I have conquered worlds," Morinth said slowly. "I have faced enemies that would make your nightmares seem pleasant. But I have never felt anything like this." Emma stepped forward last. Apollo the hawk sat on her gloved arm, his feathers gleaming copper and brown in the chamber's lights. She raised her arm, and with a single powerful beat of his wings, Apollo launched into the air. Delegates ducked and screamed as the bird of prey soared over their heads. He circled the chamber once, twice, 3 times, and then dove straight back toward Emma. At the last moment, he spread his wings and landed gently on her arm, accepting a small piece of meat as a reward. "Apollo could fly away at any moment," Emma said. "He could attack anyone in this room. But he doesn't. He comes back to me because he trusts me. Because we've built a bond that goes beyond instinct." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, from somewhere in the upper rows, a single pair of hands began to clap. Jake didn't know what species they belonged to, or if clapping even meant the same thing to them. But soon, more joined in. Clicking sounds. Whistling sounds. Stomping feet and waving tentacles. It wasn't universal approval. Jake could see many faces that still showed fear and distrust. But it was a start. For the first time since this whole crisis began, Jake felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. In the year that followed the demonstration at Convergence Prime, Earth became the most visited planet in the galaxy. Ships arrived from every corner of known space. Scientists, researchers, diplomats, and curious travelers all wanted to see the Death World for themselves. They wanted to understand how any species could survive such a hostile place, and more importantly, how they could form bonds with creatures that should have eaten them. The first alien research station was built in Montana, surrounded by mountains and forests filled with wildlife that made the visitors nervous. Armed guards walked the perimeter at all times, not to protect the station from humans, but to keep the researchers calm whenever a deer walked past. Dr. Ben Hartwell became the unofficial ambassador between Earth's animal experts and the galactic scientific community. He spent his days answering questions that seemed obvious to humans but were completely mind-blowing to aliens. "You let the dogs inside your homes?" a Velian scientist asked one morning, his 3 eyes wide with disbelief. "Where they sleep. Where you eat." "Of course," Ben replied. "They're part of the family. But what if they become hungry during the night? What if they decide to hunt you?" Ben laughed softly. "They don't think of us as prey. They think of us as their pack. Dogs are social animals, just like humans. They need companionship. They need love." The scientist made a note in his datapad, still looking thoroughly confused. But not all aliens stayed confused forever. Silith, the young Kethrani researcher who had studied dogs from afar, finally received permission to visit Earth. She arrived at the Montana station, shaking with a mixture of fear and excitement. For months, she had dreamed of meeting a real dog. Now that dream was about to come true. Lily Patterson was assigned to guide her through the process. They started slowly. On the first day, Silith simply sat in a room while Duke slept on his bed across the floor. She watched him breathe. She studied the way his ears twitched when he dreamed. "What is he thinking about?" Silith asked. "Probably chasing squirrels," Lily said with a smile. "Dogs dream, just like we do." "He dreams," Silith repeated softly, as if the idea was sacred. On the second day, Duke woke up and noticed Silith watching him. His tail began to wag, a slow, gentle movement that Silith had seen in countless videos but had never witnessed in person. Her heart raced, and the pheromones her species used for communication filled the room with the sharp smell of fear. Duke tilted his head. He sniffed the air. Then, very slowly, he stood up and walked toward her. Silith froze. Every instinct in her body told her to run. But she remembered what she had learned. She remembered that dogs could sense emotions. She remembered that fear would only make things worse. So she stayed still and waited. Duke stopped right in front of her. He sniffed her hands, her clothes, her face. His nose was cold and wet against her skin. Then he sat down and looked up at her with warm brown eyes. Lily smiled. "He's waiting for you to pet him." With trembling hands, Silith reached out and touched the top of Duke's head. His fur was soft and warm, his tail wagged faster. And when she scratched behind his ears, he leaned into her touch and made a small sound of happiness. Silith began to cry. It was not the crying of fear or sadness. It was the crying of someone who had just discovered something beautiful. Her species communicated through smell, and in that moment, she could smell something coming from Duke that her people had no word for. It was loyalty. It was trust. It was love. "He likes me," she whispered. "He does," Lily agreed. Dogs are good judges of character. News of Silith's experience spread throughout the galaxy. Videos of her petting Duke were viewed billions of times. For the first time, many aliens began to wonder if they had been wrong about humans all along, but not everyone was convinced. The Dominion of Krath was an empire that ruled the far edge of the galaxy through fear and military strength. They had watched the events of the past year with growing interest. While other species saw humanity's gift as something beautiful, the Krath saw it as something useful. Their envoy arrived on Earth without warning, a tall, armored figure with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like red stars. He demanded a meeting with the Earth Council and made his offer in simple terms. "We have bred war beasts for centuries," the envoy said. "Creatures of terrible power, designed for a single purpose: to destroy our enemies. But we have never been able to control them properly. They are wild. They are dangerous. They turn on their handlers more often than they obey." He leaned forward, his red eyes burning. "But you humans have solved this problem. You have learned how to earn the loyalty of predators. Join us. Help us train our war beasts. In exchange, the Dominion will protect Earth from all threats." Commander Jake Morrison sat across from the envoy, his face calm but his heart pounding. He thought about Duke, about Whiskers, about Apollo. He thought about the thousands of years of history that had led humans and animals to live together in peace. "No," Jake said simply. The envoy's eyes flared brighter. "You refuse?" "Our gift isn't about creating weapons," Jake replied. "It's about creating family. We won't help you turn animals into tools of war." The envoy stood, his armor clicking against the floor. "You will regret this decision, human. The Dominion does not accept rejection." He left without another word. That night, Jake called an emergency meeting. Everyone who had been part of the diplomatic mission gathered in a small conference room. Lily, Ben, Emma, Chris, and a few others who had become central to humanity's galactic relations. "The Krath won't let this go," Jake said. "They're going to come after us." Emma nodded. "They've conquered 12 systems in the last century. Their military is massive. If they decide to attack Earth, we can't stop them alone." "Then we need allies," Lily said. "We need to show the galaxy that we're worth protecting." Ben looked down at the table. The demonstration helped, but it wasn't enough. Many species still see us as a threat. They won't risk war with the Dominion just to save a bunch of Deathworlders and their pets. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he looked around the room at his friends, his family, and made a decision. "Then we'll have to show them something they've never seen before. We'll have to show them what it really means to have a bond with another species. Not just the pretty parts, the parts that matter." Outside the window, the stars glittered cold and distant. Somewhere among them, the Dominion was preparing for war, and Earth had to be ready. The Krath battle fleet appeared in Earth's solar system 6 months after the envoy had been rejected. There were 200 warships, each one bristling with weapons that could turn a city into ash in seconds. Their commander sent a simple message to the planet below: "Submit or be destroyed. You have 1 hour to decide." The message reached every government on Earth within minutes. Emergency meetings were called. Military commanders prepared for the worst. Civilians were told to seek shelter. But Jake Morrison wasn't ready to give up. He stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge and watched the enemy fleet on his screens. They were powerful, they were ruthless, and humanity had nothing that could match them in a straight fight. Then his communications officer spoke. "Sir, we're receiving signals from multiple directions. Ships are dropping out of hyperspace." Jake watched in amazement as new icons appeared on his tactical display. First came the Velian Imperium, a fleet of 30 warships with silver hulls and advanced energy weapons. Then the Kathrani arrived with their science vessels, which weren't built for combat but carried sensor technology that could find weaknesses in any enemy. And then came the Vorthak. 50 dreadnoughts appeared behind the Krath fleet, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a moon. The Vorthak were the most feared warriors in the galaxy. They had never lost a battle in 300 years. The Krath commander's voice crackled over the communication channel. "What is the meaning of this? The Velians and the Vorthak have no alliance with Earth." A new voice answered, deep and rumbling, like thunder before a storm. It was General Kron, commander of the Vorthak fleet. "We have seen what the humans can do," Kron said. "Any species that can earn the loyalty of predators has earned our respect. Today, we fight alongside them." The battle began. For 3 hours, the combined fleet fought against the Krath invasion force. Ships exploded in silent flashes of light. Energy beams cut through the darkness like glowing swords. The horizon's edge took heavy damage but stayed in the fight, Jake refusing to retreat while others were risking their lives. But the Krath had another plan, while their fleet kept the Allies busy in orbit. Transport ships slipped through the defensive lines and descended toward Earth. Thousands of shock troops landed in cities across the planet, armed with weapons that could cut through steel and armor designed to stop any bullet. They expected to find terrified civilians hiding in their homes. They found something else entirely. In Chicago, a Krath soldier kicked down the door of a small apartment. Inside, a woman named Katie Brooks stood in front of her 2 children, her body shaking with fear but her eyes hard with determination. Beside her, a golden retriever named Max growled low in his throat. The soldier raised his weapon and aimed at Katie. Max didn't hesitate. 70 pounds of muscle and loyalty slammed into the Krath with enough force to knock him off his feet. Max's jaws closed around the soldier's weapon arm, his teeth finding the gap between armor plates. The soldier screamed and dropped his gun. By the time other defenders arrived, Katie and her children were safe. Max stood over the fallen soldier, still growling, still protecting his family. The same scene played out across the world. In Texas, a group of Krath tried to take control of a ranch. They were met by 15 horses that charged straight at them, their hooves thundering against the ground. The soldiers had faced many enemies in their conquests, but they had never faced an animal that weighed 1,000 pounds and showed no fear. In Florida, a retired Marine named Nick Torres heard his front door explode inward. A Krath commander stepped through the smoke, certain of an easy victory. He didn't notice the large enclosure in the corner of the room until something heavy and muscular wrapped around his legs. Nick's pet python wasn't venomous, but a 12-foot constrictor didn't need venom to take down an enemy. The commander spent the rest of the invasion trapped in coils he couldn't escape. In Japan, stray cats that roamed the streets became early warning systems. Their sharp ears heard the Krath soldiers approaching before any human could detect them. Their hisses and yowls alerted people to hide. In Germany, police dogs worked alongside their handlers to track down invaders who tried to hide in buildings. In England, farmers released their bulls and cattle to block roads and slow enemy advances. The Krath had expected to conquer a species. They hadn't expected that species to have billions of allies already waiting for them. The invasion lasted 4 days. By the end, the Krath fleet had been destroyed. Their ground forces had been captured or killed, and their empire had suffered its first true defeat in centuries. When the fighting was over, Jake stood on a hill outside the city, watching the smoke rise from a dozen different fires. Lily stood beside him with Duke at her side. The dog had a bandage on his leg from where a piece of shrapnel had cut him during a battle near the command center. "He saved 3 people, Lily said quietly. "He just kept putting himself between them and danger, no matter how many times he got hurt." Jake knelt down and looked Duke in the eyes. The dog's tail wagged weakly, and he licked Jake's face. "Good boy. Jake whispered. The very best, boy. News of the battle spread across the galaxy. Species that had feared humanity now saw something different. A people who fought beside their animals, who protected them, and were protected by them in return. It wasn't about control or domination. It was about love that went both ways. 1 year later, Ambassador Veltris returned to the horizon's edge. The ship had been repaired and upgraded, and it now served as the flagship of Earth's small but growing fleet. Veltris walked down the corridor where he had first seen Duke and panicked. This time, when the German shepherd appeared around a corner, the ambassador didn't run. Instead, he knelt down on his thin legs and extended one trembling arm. Duke padded over slowly. He sniffed Veltris's hand carefully, his tail starting to wag. Then he licked the ambassador's fingers with a warm, wet tongue. Veltris made a sound that his species rarely made, something like laughter mixed with tears. I think, he said, looking up at Lily. I finally understand. Lily smiled and scratched Duke behind his ears. Took you long enough. Veltris stood and looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, 1,000 species were learning what humanity had always known. You didn't survive by being the strongest or the fastest. You survived by knowing how to love things that could kill you, and having that love returned,